Earlier, you talked about front of pack labeling and how it's going to cost $8 billion. And you also said that the government's new P2 plastics ban on food packaging will cost $6 billion. Will that cost be passed on to consumers and increase the price of food? Will it lead to food waste and impact food availability?
So I don't think I said that that front of pack labeling would cost $8 billion. I don't have a number for what that would cost. On the P2, it's $6 billion. And yes, all of these costs, are cost pressures that are likely to end up, being paid by consumers. And I would just remind the committee again that the reason for that is that if you have an increase on 78 or 80% of your cost of good your cost of your business model, and your profit is 2% or 3%, then we are forced into a situation where we have to pass through a lot of these cost increases.
So ultimately, consumers will pay more for fresh food if this plastics ban were to go ahead.
I believe so, yes.
Do you, in your opinion, the imposed timeline that the Liberal government has on this plastic ban, is it a realistic goal?
So Loblaw, as I mentioned before, leads the way in terms of plastic packaging reduction, and we work with a lot of manufacturers on innovation in this space. We think it will be very, very difficult to achieve the current timelines as laid out.
The government has threatened grocers with an excess profits tax if food prices don't stabilize by the beginning of 2024. And today's food prices report says that food inflation won't stabilize and an average family will pay $700 more next year. Will a grocer tax lower food prices for Canadians?
No, I don't believe that it will.
Earlier this year, the Minister of the Environment has sought feedback on the development of a pollution prevention planning notice, or P2, for primary food plastic packaging. And I'm just curious if your company participated in those consultations on the proposed plastics ban for fresh food. And could you give this committee an idea of what that will mean to consumers from a retail perspective? Will prices go up for the cost of food if a plastics ban is imposed for fresh food at the grocery level?
First of all, Walmart is actively collaborating with the Environment and Climate Change Canada's consultation on the P2 project. Walmart, we have made the announcement publicly several years ago. We are a regenerative company, and we have very ambitious goals on reusable, recyclable, and making sure that everything that all of the packaging that we use is industrially compostable, and making sure that we commit to those big ambitions of being a regenerative company. In recent discussions with the department, we encouraged to see to continue to discuss these provisions. I would say at this point it's too soon to tell what the impact will be, but certainly there needs to be more discussions on what the impact of such provisions will have in prices.
Thank you. Well, we know the front of pack labeling is going to cost $2 billion. And do you have any idea? I know you said you don't know how much it's going to cost, and at the store level, I understand you're reducing plastic waste, and that's great, very commendable, and I think we're all on board with that. It's just that the plastic ban on the fresh fruit and vegetable industry, do you know what it will do to food costs if all of a sudden food has to come into the store from faraway countries on ships? It sometimes takes weeks to get to the retail level, and that's why plastic is so important for keeping food fresh. But until we have a viable alternative, commercially viable alternative to plastic, what would it cost consumers at your end? Because I can imagine there'd be a lot more food waste at the store level if produce coming in is going to spoil a lot faster without being packaged in plastic to be able to preserve it until it can get to the consumers' homes.
Yeah. Well, as I said, we're assessing, the new conditions. You know that at Walmart we pay very close attention to the supply chain network and the cost, and making sure that we can have the most efficient network as possible. And moving fresh produce and fresh products across all of Canada with geography that we have is complicated in itself. Now, I also believe that having high ambitions on regeneration and having big goals on making this planet better is something that we all should be looking for. So we will try to continue to collaborate on those discussions. And again, I believe that I trust that we will get creative and we will find solutions as we walk through this process. And we
Very
will
much.
learn a lot to make sure that we all
The timeline that the Liberal government is suggesting on the plastics ban, though, do you think that that's feasible?
Sorry, could you please ask
The timeline that the government is suggesting for this proposed plastics ban, is that feasible within 2 years? Yes or no?
It's complicated, but we'll try our best.
The Prime Minister recently asked you to come here, and I'm just wondering what specific recommendations you gave to the government to initiate, and have any of those recommendations been acted upon?
Yeah. So it's public knowledge that we were there several weeks ago, and we had a very, I would say, collaborative conversation on all working together to find ways to lower prices. And so we all brought different ideas and different plans to make sure that we could have a stabilization of prices getting into the holiday season.
Earlier this year, the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change has proposed a P2 plastics ban. And to those watching at home, it's a new plastics ban. It's not something that's with the old ban, and that will prevent produce from having plastic packaging. And I'm just wondering, we've heard in the last meeting that it could cost upwards of $6 billion down the supply chain, which will ultimately fall on consumers, and the price of food will go up if this plastics ban were to go ahead. Did your company participate in the consultations for the proposed plastics ban for fresh food? And do you believe consumers will see an increase to the price of food if this plastics ban is imposed? And as far as the timeline, do you think the timeline is achievable?
Well, in answer to your first question, we did participate through the Retail Council, of which we are members, active members. So representations have been made. Some concerns have been shared. Any regulation or tax that will increase costs along the supply chain are a concern, especially in these inflationary times. So we have voiced those concerns, but it will be a government decision at the end of the day.
So are you in favor of the plastics ban, or are you opposed to this proposed
Well, we're all
plastics
for the
ban?
reduction of plastics, and we have a lot of initiatives at Metro to reduce plastic and reduce food waste in our stores and throughout our supply chain. I think we're doing a good job. We've made a lot of progress. There's a lot of work to do. This particular initiative, I don't know all the specific details and specific timelines particularly, but as we're all concerned about rising food prices and price stabilization, I think it would be wise to consider the timing or the timelines. So I will let the policymakers come up with those answers.
Can you? What would be the impact on? As my colleague had asked you earlier about the plastics ban. This isn't a matter of increased costs. One other consequence of this, from what we understand, is there would be actually a number of items would no longer be available. Where United States produce companies, for example, would refuse to meet these new regulations and would just no longer import to Canada. And I'm thinking bagged salads, peppers, cucumbers, all of these types of things. Have you done an assessment on that? What would the consequences of that be, not being able to bring in produce from the United States as a result of the new plastics ban? And again, this isn't the single-use plastics. This is plastics for fresh produce.
So I don't have a specific answer or analysis on that specific category, but like I said earlier, it could add to costs, and it could increase food waste. So through the RCC, we made our concerns known to the government.